Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and paying respects to elders past, present and emerging. As Vicky mentioned, I'm an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander woman originally from the Torres Strait. I grew up there, I was born up there on Thursday Island, so I know the islands quite well. And when you're talking about climate change, I'll get back to that, about sea levels rising. That's actually happening up there. But I'd like to, just firstly give a bit of my background, so you know a bit more about me and why I'm running. And then I'll start talking about some of the short-term immediate policies that have been announced under the Labor government, and then some of the longer-term things that you may be interested in, and then take some questions and answers after that, if that's okay. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in the Torres Strait. It really was, for me, a great way to grow up on an island. That's why I think I love living down here with the Bay Islands. It just reminds me of home. But again, like any sort of tropical, First Nations community, it's very impoverished. What motivated me to get into the health sector, where I'm working, I've worked in the health sector for about 22, 23 years now, is because, my family was dying pretty much of preventable diseases. I had an uncle who died at 40 from a heart attack. I had a series of aunts and my grandmother who had strokes and died in the hospital. And this is common even now. If you saw the Four Corners program about Donisha Hospital, around rheumatic heart disease, that's still common nowadays, and it's appalling, and it shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't have such poor services and such a high death rate in communities in Australia, which is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. So that really motivated me to actually work in the health sector. We moved down here over 30 years ago. My father was actually a paramedic here at the Cleveland Ambulance Station. We later moved on to finish his career on Macleay Island. I went to Cleveland High School, obviously resettled. I've moved away, like most young people do, to start a career and have a career. So I've worked around the health sector, I've worked for the public service, starting my career there with the Department of Health and Ageing in Canberra. I've also worked for the Queensland Government and Queensland Health. I'm now working and really found my passion and my feet in community health advocacy. It really was in preventative health that I found my passion to actually, stem the tide of, acute chronic illness actually developing, later in life and actually shortening people's lives. So I've made my way around working for GP practices. I did a stint at Kidney Health Australia doing a lot of advocacy for renal patients who are, on end-stage dialysis and, really experiencing some poor health outcomes, wanting closer to home dialysis. So I've been working in government, public service. I've worked in advocacy positions, advocating to government for policy changes, particularly around healthcare. And so there was an opportunity that I took up. It was one of those things that you never think of. I never was really interested in politics. But being in Canberra, the opportunity came up under the Rudd government when he appointed the first Indigenous Health Minister with that portfolio. So I thought, what the hell, I'm going to put my hand up and I'm going to tell him what he should be doing in Indigenous health, and that's what I did for about 3.5 to 4 years. I worked as the Indigenous Health Advisor to Warren Snowden. So for me, that was actually, having been around and working around government to actually affect change, that was the best way that we could actually do it. And it was about resetting relationships with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, but also, looking at how do you actually build the interface with primary care and mainstream health services as well too, so it actually fits together. So for me, that was a really, opportune time, and it really did spark my passion and my thinking about to actually affect change in this country. Why not put your hand up, actually run for politics? So, I moved back here, had my family, settled down, and the opportunity just came. I wasn't planning for it. The opportunity just came to actually put your hand up to run for the ALP, and I thought, well, I'll give it a crack this time and run with it. So, for the last, it's been over a year now that since they announced me. For the last year, it's been a huge juggle trying to, work full-time. I've been working as the Chief Operations Officer at the Institute for Urban Indigenous Health on the north side of Brisbane, so our footprint is pretty much from the Gold Coast up to Caboolture. We actually do run aged care packages in Hervey Bay, so we extend that far out past Laidley as well too. So we operate 21 clinics, and I can tell you the last 2 years dealing with delivering primary healthcare services, but also ensuring that our communities were vaccinated and were protected against COVID was just a phenomenal effort. We're very lucky, we've seen some awful data of projections of death rates, so that they expected, just based on the experience in New South Wales, Western New South Wales and Victoria as well too, so that's something that we didn't want to happen here. So, and I guess, that brings me to, running as a candidate. There's stuff that your party announces, which, I think are really good at the moment. I think from my experience, certainly from the health sector, the health system's in crisis. It's been in crisis for a number of years. But, with the advent of COVID actually impacting not just our health systems, but access to doctors, separating people, it's really shook up a lot of the systems that have been in place, but also the workforce. The workforce is tired, the workforce is stressed, the workforce is old, and the workforce is going to hit a wall in a couple of years because we just don't have the number of qualified people who are going to be coming into the system to actually back that up. So, they're projecting that in 3 or 4 years' time, and we're heavily dependent on overseas trained doctors now as it is. So that's one of the pressure points that you will see Labor's announced in the short term, protecting Medicare, training more GPs. That was a policy that was announced this week, I think. They're going to change the way restrictions are, the country's divided up into different priority areas for GPs. So, change that, protect Medicare. Cost of living is a huge issue. I've been out there campaigning on the doors, calling people. They're concerned about access to affordable healthcare, getting access on time, but also, the cost of living. Anyone who drives a car will know how much petrol has just skyrocketed in the last couple of weeks. And this is, there's no downward trajectory for this. The subsidy's only going to last for 6 months. And then we're still going to deal with, the longer term impacts of, of that, the cost. You would have seen in Albo's budget reply about the aged care system. And this is something that, I've been working in my role. Daily we provide home support packages to people to stay in their homes a lot longer. So one of the things that, has been really distressing to watch is the recommendations of the Aged Care Royal Commission and just the state of our aged care facilities around the country. We've heard some appalling stories of people, being malnutritioned, lying in their beds for hours on end, not being turned over, not seeing their families, particularly in COVID as well too, being locked out. The other thing that was mentioned today was just the review of the NDIS system. So, like for someone who has worked trying to work with the NDIA to actually get people access, it's been so damaging and so difficult. So I have no idea how families who have someone who requires that additional support is actually doing that. So, it's I think the federal government has spent something like $28 million taking people to tribunal over their packages because they've actually, which is a ridiculous waste of taxpayers' money, and I've actually talked to a woman who told me for a whole 18 months she tried to get a review from her child who was requiring independent living situation, 24-hour support, required a review, had a huge cutback. She actually lodged a mediation, was taken to the tribunal over 12 months, and has now, she got lawyered up, they got lawyered up, they were in courts for 12 months, and subsequently someone actually stepped in and said, no, we shouldn't have done this to you, we're really sorry. But, just all that distress, all of that money, that waste of money, and the time. This poor woman, was trying to just get the best outcomes for her child. So these are the short and immediate sort of policies that have been floating around and announced recently. You would have probably heard as well too about the federal ICAP, the Anti-Corruption Commission that Labor has committed to actually legislating, and Albo's mentioned in the last week that he's going to do that by the end of the year if a Labor government is elected. So I think that's a great thing, and I think, all of the candidates and MPs on our side of the bench are up for it, It's about integrity of process, it's about being honest and using taxpayers' money in the best possible way that's evidence-based and based on need. So that's some of the immediate things. Some of the longer-term things that have been announced last year, you would have seen our Powering Australia policy, which is, a step towards our commitment to climate change. So we've actually endorsed and support, having a net zero reduction by 2050. We think we can do 43% by 2030, and that's just on the limited amount of working with industry that we think we can achieve. Like, this is, obviously a long time frame, but we need to start now. There's going to be a lot more discussion on what that pathway looks like, should we actually win government. But part of that Powering Australia policy is around, that was announced, it was $20 billion for the upgrade in our electricity grid so that it can actually cope with renewable energies. There was an announcement around electric cars, making electric cars cheaper, to scale that up a lot more. That complements the Queensland Government's investment in infrastructure here in terms of charging stations up and down the coast and out west as well too. There is support for 10,000 apprenticeships in the new energy trades. So I was out at Alex Hill's TAFE today just doing a visit. We do have an announcement around free TAFE courses from 1 January next year if we win government. So that will look at those industries, training up people in those industries that have been really hard hit. So talking about your tradies, and I was talking to the guys there, and they were saying they want to actually start expanding on what does a renewable apprenticeship look like, and that includes servicing solar panels, batteries as well too, and cars, EVs, because it's going to change the whole infrastructure here in servicing and maintenance. There's 400 community batteries as part of that proposal as well too. So, and one of the batteries I announced was in Bergdale. What I would like to see is actually the batteries and probably solar banks as well too being fitted out on the islands. That would make a huge difference in terms of continuity of electricity across to the islands. And then, I'm just trying to think now, what else is there? Yeah, so that's really the climate change policy. In terms of longer term, we don't have everything worked out. This has got to be done in consultation with stakeholders, but also industry as well too, because this is like the Titanic turning a ship. It's a start, but there's more that needs to be done. I will touch on Toondah Harbour. You would have seen my opinion piece that I wrote in the Redland City Bulletin. I've been very strong and clear that I'm an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander woman. My culture is around environmental protection and environmental management. We are traditional owners of Waititi country on Eastern Cape York. As part of that native title agreement and determination is our responsibility to land and sea. We do employ sea rangers and rangers that take care of country as well too, so that's an important part of our cultural beliefs, an important part of my framing as well too. And people ask me, and I know this is frustrating, ask me, what's my opinion of the Toondah Harbour development, and I have talked to Terry Butler around positioning on this, and it really is, we're in the middle of an election campaign now. There is a potential that Labor will win government. If that occurs, this process of an environmental impact statement report, there needs to be a decision made on that. It needs to be an impartial decision. So coming out and taking a position before that can be determined would actually position it as being potentially liable. So we need to rest on the integrity of a process that's going to actually occur based on the evidence, the advice from the department, and the report, what that report says. So I'm not sure how long that will take, but it is, and again, it is about, that's going to marry into, and it is about building up the integrity of government and the integrity of government processes. So, and I did mention, a federal ICAP will be established by the end of that year, so there will be transparency over this at that level. I might just wrap up there. I do have a few other dot points, but I'm not sure whether they'll come up in questions as well too. So I might just open it to the floor.
Thank you, Donisha.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the other dot points that I had about the ABC. We've actually said that it needs to be funded to be an independent body. It needs to actually hold government to account. At the moment, it's not doing that. It's been severely, the funding has been severely cut from the ABC over the years, and there's been an attempt to privatise it, in other words. So we definitely don't want the privatisation of the ABC. We've said we will protect and strengthen the ABC. We're committed to reversing the cuts, the funding cuts, doing a review of the funding model. And I don't know about you, but I live in Redland Bay, and whenever it rains, the signal of the ABC just drops out completely. It's just appalling, and it's, you know, there are some really great programs on there. So I was really glad to see that we're going to review the transmission services to ensure that there's reliable broadcasting. And just in terms of the job seeker, I guess it's an election, people want you to do everything. And I know, you know, it's a big ask financially to increase, same as the pension. I don't think we've come out on the pension. We've definitely said we can't do it as an election commitment. But I mean, there's opportunities. You know, if Labor have said if they win government, we will hand down a second budget this year. So there's opportunities along the way to actually review what the financial position is, because we've had 9 years of this government, and we've got nearly $1 trillion in debt, national debt. So, you know, there really needs to be a good financial analysis of what our position looks like. We're trying to turn the economy to more investing in renewables. One of the things that I had down here is the National Reconstruction Fund, which we're looking at. I think it's $15 billion into investing into manufacturing onshore, like for electric vehicles. We should be bringing that back here, doing a lot more stuff onshore, but also investing into renewable businesses and manufacturing, hydrogen plant down the road there. Yeah, charging stations. There's a company here that's importing overseas. You know, why don't we scale it here? My opinion, this is just an observation. You've had 3 levels of government put a proposal internationally for the Olympic Games. So I think that package has been accepted. I think it's going to be hard to actually unpick some of the sites from that, which includes the Birkdale land. What would be possible, and this is just, you know, completely my opinion, is looking at how do you manoeuvre within that agreement. They're at the start of a long planning process now. I'm assuming there will be a number of community consultations, a number of community advisory groups on that. So, you know, I'm just saying, you know, federal government, state government, local government have already stitched it up. So it's a matter of actually where do you move to within that package.